story goes all the way back to when I was a little kid, maybe second or third grade. Most of my memories from that age are blurry, but this one has stayed sharp for reasons you'll understand soon. It was a regular school day, except it had been pouring non-stop since morning. By the time my parents picked me up, the rain was coming down so hard it felt like the whole world was drowning. That night, they had some kind of fancy event to attend. A fundraiser, a dinner party. I don't really remember. What I do remember is that they weren't supposed to be gone all night, but the storm only got worse, flooding streets and making it too dangerous to drive home. So they ended up staying at a friend's house closer to the event. I still remember the phone call. My mom apologizing again and again, promising they'd be back by morning, giving me a list of grown-up things to do before bed. Lock the doors and windows, keep one light on, close all the blinds. At that age, I didn't really understand why she made it sound so serious. Honestly, I was excited to be left alone. No bedtime, all the candy I wanted, and the whole living room TV to myself. I told myself I'd do the chores later, right before bed. But sometime after midnight, the sugar rush wore off, and I drifted off to sleep on the couch, with the storm raging outside.
When I woke up, the TV had already gone into sleep mode, meaning I'd been out for at least 3 hours. The first thing I noticed wasn't the silence, but the cold. Not the normal nighttime chill, it was sharper, heavier, the kind that makes your skin prickle. At first, I thought about just curling back up and going back to sleep, but then I remembered my mom's list. Even at that age, I knew she'd find out if I didn't do it, and I didn't want to get in trouble after she trusted me to stay home alone. So I dragged myself off the couch and went around my house. I locked the front and back doors, pulled down all the blinds, checked the windows, and made sure a light was still on. Everything was sealed tight, nothing out of place, which made the chill feel even stranger. I pressed my hand to a few windows, half expecting a draft, but they were solid. I told myself maybe the storm had knocked out the heater and I was too tired to think more about it. That made sense at the time, so I let it go. Still, as I climbed upstairs, the cold seemed to follow me. When I got to my room, I realized how bad the storm had gotten. Rain slamming the windows like gravel, thunder rattling the glass, wind howling like it was alive. And yet, beneath all that noise, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cold wasn't coming from outside at all. It felt like it was already inside the house, waiting for me.
From the living room downstairs, the storm had just been background noise, muffled by walls and distance. But once I was in my bedroom, it was impossible to ignore. My window faced straight outside, and the rain slammed so hard it sounded like it was trying to break through. Every few minutes, lightning lit up the room, followed by thunder so loud it shook the glass. I wasn't afraid of storms, but I kept worrying one of the old trees might snap and crash into the house. That thought kept me restless, even though I'd been half asleep not long before. Then I heard something that didn't belong. A faint creaking, like wood shifting under weight. The strange part was, the entire upstairs was carpeted. There was no wood to creak. At first, I told myself it was just a tree swaying in the wind, but the sound didn't fit. I knew what storms sounded like, and this was different, slower, more deliberate, almost like footsteps. I gripped my blanket tight, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But the sound kept coming, and soon I realized it wasn't the storm keeping me awake. It was that awful creaking. Finally, I sat up, my heart racing, and tried to focus past the storm. Lightning exploded outside, flooding my room with white light, and everything looked normal, except my eyes locked on the closet. It was the only wooden thing in the room. Darkness returned, and I sat frozen, waiting. A minute later, another flash lit the room, and in that instant, I saw it. The closet door was open. Just a crack, but open. I knew it had been shut before. I was absolutely certain. And that meant one terrifying thing. Something had opened it. Something was in my room. I didn't scream. I didn't call out. I didn't even let myself think.
My body just moved on its own. I slipped out of bed as quietly as possible and inched toward the door, every step feeling like it took years off my life. That short walk from my bed to the hallway felt like the longest, most painful journey I had ever made. Somehow, I made it out of the room without making a sound, and the second I reached the stairs, I bolted down to the dining room and crawled under the table. Only then did the terror really hit me, and I started to cry. My parents were gone, I was alone, and there was someone in my room. I had no way out. I don't know how long I stayed under that table, but eventually I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. My chest tightened, and I held my breath. These weren't normal footsteps. They were light, almost like the sound of dancers on stage. They were erratic, like whatever it was bouncing, stumbling, almost dragging itself from one step to the next. The sound grew closer until I realized they were heading straight toward me, like it already knew I was hiding there. I thought my heart was going to explode. Then I saw them. From under the table, just a sliver of view, 2 bare feet stepped into sight. Mud caked every toe, and their legs were yellowish, covered in cuts and scratches like they'd crawled through thorn bushes. They didn't even look human. They were trembling, unsteady, like standing up was a struggle, but every step made them feel more real, more dangerous. My mouth went dry, and I bit my lip so hard it almost bled just to stop myself from screaming. Then, without warning, something slipped from their hand. A wrench hit the floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the house. I froze. If they bent down to pick it up, they'd see me crouched under that table. I locked my eyes on their ankles, waiting. They didn't move. They just stood there, in silence, the air thick with tension, like a standoff where even breathing too loudly would end me. Finally, after what felt like forever, they turned and walked off. I stayed frozen as their uneven footsteps stumbled and stomped around the first floor, circling the house like they were looking for something. Each second stretched into eternity. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard the front door creak open. It slammed shut against the storm outside, and just like that, they were gone. I stayed hidden under that table for what felt like hours. Part of it was pure fear, but another part was something deeper. Trauma setting in before I even understood what that word really meant. I was old enough to know how real the danger was, but not old enough to know how to handle it. The rest of the night is just a blur in my memory. At some point, I pulled the wrench up off the floor, not wanting my parents to come home and find it there, proof of what had almost happened. By morning, after making sure the front door was locked tight, I crept back upstairs, crawled into bed, and somehow drifted off. On the outside, everything seemed normal again, but inside, I was never the same. For reasons I still can't explain, I didn't tell my parents right away. Maybe I was afraid of them realizing I hadn't done everything my mom asked before bed. Maybe I thought they'd never believe me. It wasn't until years later that I finally shared the story, and even then, it took a lot to convince them it wasn't just a nightmare I made up. Looking back, keeping it to myself was a huge mistake, because by the time I spoke up, there was nothing anyone could do. The truth is, that night scarred me. For the rest of my childhood, I slept with a nightlight. I hated the dark. And even now, I get chills thinking about those muddy feet, that open closet door, and the storm outside. I may never understand what really came into my house that night, but one lesson has stuck with me ever since. Always lock your doors at night. I'm an only child, and it's just me, my mom, and my dad in a house that honestly feels way too big for 3 people. My parents always joked about wanting more kids, but it never happened. So here I was, 15 years old, rattling around in this oversized place. It was a rainy Saturday night in May, one of those weekends right before summer when everything feels in between. School's almost over, but not quite. I should tell you something important about me. I've always had these strange medical issues. Panic attacks, fainting spells, trouble breathing. And on top of that, I can only fall asleep in total silence. People laugh when I tell them that rain keeps me awake. Everyone else says it's relaxing, but for me, it's torture. Where I live, it doesn't rain often, but when it does, it pours hard enough to shake the whole house. That night was one of those nights. Not a full-on thunderstorm, but heavy enough that no matter how I tossed and turned, I couldn't tune it out. By the time midnight rolled around, I gave up on sleep. I decided maybe if I burned off some energy, I'd be able to rest. So I did something I'd done before. I grabbed a rain jacket and slipped outside for a walk. My parents actually encouraged it whenever I had insomnia, since our neighborhood was quiet and safe. The park nearby was well lit and just steps from my backyard, so I never felt in danger. I left my phone behind on purpose, knowing it would only keep me wired. And out there, in the middle of the night, it was strangely peaceful. The rain clung to every branch and every leaf, sliding down in streams that shimmered under the streetlights. I wandered for about 20 minutes, enjoying the quiet world to myself, and by the time I turned back toward home, I was finally starting to feel tired. At least, that's what I thought, until the walk back changed everything. As I cut through the park, my eyes drifted toward the road and froze on something that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was just a garbage bag someone had tossed aside, stretched out and soaked by the rain. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. It wasn't trash. It was a person. They were lying flat in the middle of the street, face down, motionless, rain cooling around their body. My stomach twisted instantly. The first thought that hit me was that they'd been struck by a car, maybe fallen into the road, left there hurt or worse. Because what other reason could there possibly be for a body to just be lying there like that, especially on a stormy night? Every instinct screamed at me to keep walking, to look away and go home, but I couldn't. My parents raised me to help people, and no matter how much my gut told me to ignore it, I couldn't just walk past someone who might be dying. So I forced myself closer, each step heavier than the last. As I got near, I could see his clothes, black pants and a dark plaid shirt, the fabric clinging to his body from the rain. It didn't make sense. Who dresses like that to go out in a downpour? It felt wrong, unsettling, and then I noticed something even stranger. The air shifted around me. Just moments before, the rain had been warm, almost soothing, but now every drop that hit my skin was ice cold, sharp enough to make me shiver through my jacket. My whole body felt off, like I had crossed into a place I wasn't supposed to be. That's when it happened. From behind me, cutting through the sound of rain, came a screech, high-pitched, guttural, broken. My body snapped around before my brain caught up, adrenaline exploding in my chest. It wasn't quite a human scream, but it wasn't an animal sound either. It was somewhere in between, like a howl that had been twisted, stretched, and mangled into something unnatural. My legs locked, my heart hammered, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Whatever was happening here, I wasn't just witnessing an accident. I was stepping into something far darker. I scanned the tree line, but saw nothing. The sound must have come from deeper in the park. Yet the mystery alone had my heart racing. Fear grows strongest when you can't explain what's happening. And then it got worse. When I turned back toward the street, the body wasn't on the ground anymore. He was sitting up, head tilted unnaturally, staring straight at me. My vision tunneled, the world fading until only him remained, drenched in rain, eyes locked on mine. A flash of lightning showed his face just long enough to make me choke. Then, in one sharp motion, he stood. My body froze, but my brain screamed to run. He suddenly sprinted straight toward me. And that's when I saw it, a kitchen knife glinting in his hand, rain dripping down the blade. His mouth stretched into a wide, twisted grin, and his voice tore through the storm as he screamed, "I'll kill you!" My heart nearly stopped. I snapped out of my haze and bolted the opposite way, the wet grass grabbing at my shoes, each step threatening to drag me down. But at least the storm slowed him too. I knew I couldn't lead him back to my house, so I made the only choice I had. I ran toward the trees, toward the same darkness where that screech had come from. Every instinct told me I was running straight into danger, What choice did I have? It was either lose him in the woods or die in the open. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. Every ounce of strength went into moving forward, into praying the dense park would hide me before he closed the distance. I didn't know if he was still chasing me, but I wasn't about to stop and find out. It felt like if I slowed down even for a second, fear itself would swallow me whole. I pushed into the woods, lungs burning, stomach twisting until I nearly collapsed. I ducked behind a tree, gasping for air, rain dripping down my face. My eyes darted everywhere but saw nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just the storm. I stayed hidden, frozen, counting every second that crawled by like an hour. After what felt like forever, probably 20 minutes, I finally forced myself out. I didn't dare take the direct path home, so I circled around the park, slipping through the back trails until I came out streets away from my house. Nobody followed me. When I finally stumbled inside, drenched and shaking, I collapsed onto my bed. I was safe, but the terror of that night stuck with me. I never got a real answer for what happened that night, and honestly, I doubt I ever will. That howl is still the part that haunts me the most. I can't convince myself it was connected to the man chasing me, but the timing was just too perfect to ignore. Maybe he heard it too. Maybe it triggered something in him. Or maybe he was just another insane person out in the rain. People say he could have been on drugs, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying. What I do know is that there are things in this world we'll never fully understand. And sometimes the scariest part isn't the attack, it's the not knowing why. Even now, years later, I still live in the same house, and every rainy night brings that memory back. It's something I'll carry with me forever. I'm 29 now. Honestly, one of the only things that ever really clears my head is camping. And I don't mean campgrounds or national parks packed with people. I'm talking real middle of nowhere camping. The kind where you feel like you're the last person on Earth. Growing up in Northern California, I learned how to find those hidden spots, and this story happened just a few months ago. I had just gone through a breakup and I was a mess. I needed space, I needed silence, so I packed up my truck and drove out with no real plan. I ended up heading back to a quiet riverside spot I'd discovered once before. It wasn't official, just a dirt road cutting through nothing until it opened up to the river. I got there late afternoon, but the second I turned onto that dirt path, my stomach sunk. There were already 2 trucks parked at the trailhead, one gray, one white. No people in sight, but knowing someone else was out there killed the peace I came looking for. I sat there, debating if I should turn around, but told myself it was a big river and they would probably camp far away. I hiked about 15 minutes down and spotted 2 guys fishing. They looked like the kind you'd expect, beards, heavy boots. They seemed distracted. As I passed, one of them quickly covered something with his jacket, forced a smile, and said they were just shooting cans and didn't mean to freak me out. I nodded and kept walking, but something about the way he rushed his words didn't sit right. It felt forced, unnatural, like he was trying too hard to sound casual. My gut told me something was off, but I pushed it down. People in the country can be awkward with strangers, right? I told myself to let it go and just focus on setting up. I found a spot tucked away further down the bend, thick trees blocking the trail, enough to feel private. I set up camp, cracked open a book, and tried to settle in. Then the rain started. Just a light drizzle at first, but it was enough to change the mood. The sound of the river mixed with the rain should have been peaceful, but deep down, that uneasy feeling never really went away. After the sun dipped below the horizon, I crawled into my tent and tried to force myself to sleep. But my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Every mistake from the breakup replayed in my head, every word, every moment, until I was exhausted from overthinking. The river's steady rush and the soft patter of rain should have been comforting, but instead they only amplified the silence between. That's when I heard it, something faint, something wrong. At first, it blended with the rain like uneven drops hitting the ground, but the longer I listened, the more certain I became. Those weren't raindrops, they were footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching the wet ground as they circled my campsite. My stomach dropped. I already knew who it was before I even looked. I've camped enough to know better than to go unprepared, and thank God for that. I reached for my handgun, the weight of it giving me at least a sliver of confidence, and unzipped the tent as quietly as I could. The second I stepped into the rain, my heart hammered against my ribs so hard it felt like it might break through. I flicked on my flashlight and swept it across the trees, every shadow morphing into something sinister. And then I saw him, the same guy from earlier, standing just a few yards away, half hidden behind a tree. His face was blank, empty, like no real thought lived behind his eyes. But worse than that vacant stare was what he carried in his hand, a small axe. The metal glistened under the beam of my light, dripping with rain. For a frozen moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The reality hit me. Out here, I was completely alone. If he came at me, nobody would hear. Somehow, despite the shaking in my hands and the pounding in my ears, I raised the gun and pointed it at him. My insides were screaming, but I forced my voice calm. Leave now or I'll kill you. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just stared with that hollow face like nothing I said mattered. Then he mumbled about his friend Ivan, how Ivan had tried to stop him from coming after me, and how he had to take care of Ivan. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to know what that meant. I didn't wait. I fired into the trees above his head. The gunshot exploded through the storm. He stumbled back, startled, and for the first time I felt a sliver of control. I pointed again and barked, "Drop the axe!" He finally let it fall into the mud, and the thud of it hitting the ground almost made me collapse with relief. But I couldn't relax. I ordered him to take off his shoes so he couldn't follow me. He obeyed, blank-faced, slipping them off in the rain. I kept the gun on him and told him to drag my gear out of the tent. Piece by piece, he tossed it into the open, fumbling like he was barely tethered to reality. I stuffed the essentials into my pack, grabbed the axe too, and told myself the tent wasn't worth dying over. Then I hurled his shoes deep into the dark and ordered him to walk the opposite way. I kept my flashlight on him until he vanished into the storm. Only then did I move. Hiking back through the pitch-black forest, heart hammering, was worse than staring down the barrel of that night itself. I didn't know if he was circling back, or if Ivan, whomever Ivan was, might still be out there. My flashlight barely cut through the rain, and I used it sparingly, terrified to give myself away. Every shadow felt alive. Finally, I reached the pullout. Both trucks were still there, gray and white, looming like silent threats. I didn't stop. I tossed everything into my car, slammed the door, and floored it, mud spraying as I tore down that road and away from what could have been the end of me. When I finally got cell service back, I called the police and told them everything, giving the best description I could. It's been a few months since that night, and I still don't know if they ever found him, or if they even looked. But honestly, I don't want to know. What sticks with me, what haunts me even more than seeing that axe in his hand, is what he said about Ivan, that he had taken care of him. I can't let myself think too deeply about what that really meant, because there aren't many explanations that don't end in blood. At the end of the day, I'm just grateful I was armed, because I know without a doubt I wouldn't be here to tell this story otherwise.